record on it. All right, so start recording. All right, welcome everyone to the Agile Austin's Agile at Scale Special Interest Group. So we'll go through some quick slides first. So what is Agile Austin? I know, we get people, since we went virtual, from all over the place, all over the world. So if you're not familiar with Agile Austin, Agile Austin's mission is to promote Agile software development through exchange of ideas and practices while providing opportunities for professional growth of our members. It's a lot of why we're here on the Agile at Scale SIG. So the Agile at Scale SIG really is around that professional growth and exchanging ideas, mostly around scaling Agile or things that scaling around the enterprise, so taking Agile development to the enterprise. So we don't focus on any one framework. So we try to stay open to all ideas. So I am Leland Newsome. I saw Ben on just a little bit ago. Ben facilitated the last month for me, and he kind of helped me out as co-facilitator. So as if I have conflicts or someone needs to start, that it's not just dependent on me. So Ben's going to be helping us out. I put both of our LinkedIn's. Feel free to connect with us. This SIG, we meet every Friday, or not every third Friday of the month from 12 to 1 o'clock. So try to start on time. I should say start and end on time, but sometimes if people need to drop at 1 and discussions are still going, I haven't necessarily killed it at 1 yet. So, so continue those. So we do like to thank our sponsors, right? Before we used to meet at Agile Velocity and we used to have pizza, but still there's things like paying for Zoom so we can all do more than 40 minutes. And so our sponsors really help provide that. So we'd like to thank our sponsors. Platinum being Agile Velocity, gold sponsors, you see the different gold sponsors with Kasasa, Agile Rising, Eliza, Leading Agile, and some of the silver sponsors and bronze sponsors in the list. My last slide is just some upcoming events. It's not everything. If you go to meetup/Agile Austin, you can go to events and you see all of the events. But the ones more focused, what used to be the monthly meeting is now changed to the featured speaker series. The next one is September 8th from 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time. The topic is the RB conversation with Lee Allison. In the Agile at Scale SIG, next month we have Diana Larson doing an Ask Me Anything about Agile fluency things. I believe it's going to be a quick intro to the Agile fluency model, and then a lot of Q&A time for people to ask questions. And then in October, we'll have Peter Fischbach joining us. I actually think he's in Germany, joining us from Germany. So with the topic around why Scrum at Scale isn't just another framework. So both of those are available out in Meetup. Please go sign up, and hope to see many people there. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn this over to Alex. Alex is joining us for the second time presenting at ours. So this is welcome back. And
thank you.
So I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and go ahead.
I will do that right after I figure out how to share this whole thing. Okay, let's just make sure that we can see the slides, and we'll get started immediately.
Yep, I can see them.
Yay, success. All right, guys, it's a pleasure, and thank you, Leland, for inviting me again. It's been a great experience before. I believe that was in 2017 when I spoke to this community first, and yeah. Hey, now it's 2020, the crazy year. So
yeah, I think you were one of my first, even when we were meeting in person, one of my first ones that I experimented with bringing in a remote speaker. So
correct. Yes. And that's interesting because I lived in Colorado back then, and now I'm a Texan. So right. I live in the Woodlands as of February this year and enjoying it immensely. Actually, it turns out it has as many bike paths as Boulder County in Colorado. So that's amazing. Totally enjoying it. All right, awesome. Guys, thank you for joining today. Today we will be talking about pursuing enterprise outcomes. What actually we'll be discussing is how to be more productive for you as a team, as an organization in accomplishing those complex missions you are after. And actually what's interesting is this topic, however important, is very often omitted on agile agenda of enterprises, transformation groups, or even conferences, with too much attention oftentimes to more of the ritualistic side and rather less to the overall goal of the work that hundreds or sometimes even thousands of people in the organization are trying to pull off. So today we'll be talking about that, but I don't want you to think that what we're discussing necessarily only pertains to some company executive that lives somewhere deep down in the bunker and has nothing to do with me as a scrum master or me as a product owner or agile coach, etc. It's rather important to everybody, and we will try to hit on different topics, and some of the constructs discussed today are specifically designed to envision different problems at different levels of the enterprise. So everyone is welcome, starting from an executive all the way to practitioners at the team level. Also, it will not all exactly be about software or IT today. And the reason is that enterprises have multiple different functions that have to work in concert to produce ultimate business value. And we'll talk a little bit about that. However, that being said, most of the examples will pertain to software today. And every once in a while, or rather at the end of every little section, we'll have some suggestions. That will be something that you may consider doing as your homework to get started on the pretty difficult part of pursuing real, meaningful, valuable enterprise outcomes. Now, what's interesting is that a little over a week ago, my new book has come out, Pursuing Enterprise Outcomes, and I'm incredibly happy that it finally happened. This has been probably the hardest writing project I was involved in, and yeah, I'm happy it's over, and I'm happy that from now on I don't have to explain everything myself. Now there's a book and something can be taken out of that. Today's conversation will be built respectively. I will try to outline some ideas, some methods, some approaches, and I will also try to provide some pointers for the rest of it. Well, the book is pretty substantial in size. It's almost 300 pages, really packed. So you see the challenge that I'm having, right? I will try to pack as much as I can in the 45-minute time frame, and the rest will be for our Q&A. However, you can only make so much happen in that short period of time. So we will use this as a paradigm, outlining the main concepts, the rest of the pointers discussed in terms of what you can find in the book. So that's in terms of the rules of the game today. And with that, let's get started. And we'll start with the language that we will be using today. And by that, I don't mean my Ukrainian accent. I'm actually referring to a visual language that we will be utilizing, which we call interaction maps. It's basically a very simplistic way to express connections and interactions in the organization. And the best way to do that is to present them by examples. So imagine what you see on the screen is two people obviously connected in some way in the organization. So having said that, yeah, we see there's a connection. Let's probably give them some names. So Brenda and Jaden, they can be, I don't know, they can be some marketing professionals working on the marketing campaign, or maybe they are two developers creating a shared feature together. But obviously there's some connection going on, right, between them. So let's stick to that software example. Let's say they're working on the same feature. Well, we've seen this before. This is happening in so many instances. Two or more people working on the same chunk of functionality. They can collaborate effectively in our case, and soon after the starting to work on the feature, they deliver the result and everything is great. Now let's start changing the parameters of this interaction one by one and see what happens. And first in that regard will be actually an interesting additional change in circumstance, which is Brenda and Jaden will no longer be in the same time zone. In fact, they will be in two different, very inconveniently different time zones. So there suddenly is this disconnect that is a result of that lag in time where Jaden wakes up, sees some notes from Brenda, tries to implement something what he thinks is reasonable, commits the code in the evening. Brenda does the same in the morning, and so on and so forth. They no longer have an ability to share the same screen, to debug the code together, to do all those things that were so productive, making them so productive before. Right? And what they notice is bit by bit, they accumulate rework that occurs simply due to this new change in circumstance, which is in their case, different time zones. So instead of having all capacity at their disposal, now there is a part of capacity that is wasted as a result of that particular disconnect in the system, time zone. Now, let's continue changing parameters. Let's assume there is more, not just the time zone. There's also, let's say, conflict that is going on between Brenda and Jaden. And that's maybe because Jaden at some point said some really nasty things about Brenda's approach to class inheritance in her Java code. And now it's on. Now there's no choice. They do not talk to each other unless highly necessary. And guess what? It only adds to the disconnect. These two disconnects produce even more waste, more rework to their capacity. And now the useful capacity is even smaller. Right? And so on, we can get another one, which is, let's say they come from different expertise levels, which happens on the teams so often, which also means that they are essentially speaking different languages. And that only adds to the problem with their capacity. Leaders of organizations often don't know this. Even practitioners at the team level don't know this. Scrum masters, product owners, assuming that what they think is the actual capacity or velocity or whatever you want to call it of their organization is really it. Not so often, right? We see that the actual productivity of this team of two people depends on things that we don't talk about so often, which is the disconnects in the system. And that's what interaction maps are all about. This is, by the way, maybe one of the simplest example of the interaction map. It's basically some entities, some objects connected together, some disconnects are marked up on it, and we can have a reasonable conversation or presentation over it. This is a very helpful and yet simplistic tools for discovery and communication of enterprise landscape in terms of interaction. Okay, so far so good. Now, the thing is that they are not alone in their organization. There's more. There are also customers, and the customer is probably just a way too simple a generalization for the whole thing, right? In their case, for instance, there's customer representative who actually initiates all the requirements. Doesn't matter what flavor of them. Maybe it's user stories that they call them. Doesn't matter. And there's the actual end user who will be using the product that they deliver, the features that they are working on. Now, what's interesting is that we have more disconnects. And hey, this disconnect here, well, maybe that's just their PO who is trying to do her best, but cannot because, hey, POs are so often absolutely underpowered. So all the PO does is just conveying the information from customer representative to Brenda and Jaden, and that's it. And making almost no decisions in terms of scoping and prioritization of their own. Why is the customer representative and the user disconnected? Well, for a number of reasons. This happens so often. Customer representative thinks that he knows what is needed to the end user. This is happening so often, even though they are not included in the actual execution environment for the software that they are defining, right? And the end user, by the way, is not so excited either about spending any time with neither the customer representative nor the team. Well, because they have their day job. That's so simple, right? And plus, maybe they don't like software they have today, so they have not so much faith in the software to be delivered. So there's this disconnect. Now, what's interesting, it's not that just these additional disconnects eat up even more capacity of the team. What actually happens is that when you have multiple disconnects in the system like this, they begin to reinforce one another. They, in other words, launch a vicious loop of disconnects that act, for instance, as follows. The customer representative sends new requirements to the guys, well, maybe through the PO, but that's assumed, right? The problem is, though, that being disconnected from the end user, they have no idea what is really needed, but they think they know what's really needed, right? So they are requesting the wrong thing to begin with. Now, we have these disconnects that prevent the guys from properly implementing what was intended. So now they add on top of the wrong requirements, it's also a wrong implementation, and that's what they deliver to the end user. Interesting. Now, the end user looks at that. Of course, it doesn't match what they really need to be more productive at their work. And they go back to customer representative and say, hey, this is poo-poo. But what customer representative takes out of it is that, oh, so these guys here must have implemented it incorrectly. And they sent another request to clear the air to implement the right thing, which is nevertheless still the wrong thing. They just don't know it. And the cycle continues on and on, eating up valuable capacity, producing almost nothing as a result. Look at this picture, however. Everyone is busy all the time, and yet there's almost no value delivered. Okay, so now again, this really easy to have a conversation like this using interaction maps, but in interaction maps, the objects don't necessarily have to be people. It can be even concepts that pertain to enterprise performance, and some of such examples we will consider right next. But before we do, here's a little homework that you may consider doing. I would like you to think, after this presentation, what disconnects are negatively impacting the performance of your group. And maybe it would be a good thought experiment for you, or maybe not just thought experiment, to get together with someone and try to map them out using that simplistic interaction maps language and see if it will help you identify them. Now, in terms of identifying disconnects, some very specific methods are described in the second chapter of the book. So if you're interested, you may take a look at that. Now, there is an even worse type of disconnect that we haven't talked about yet. And I will introduce this type of disconnect by examples, because that's probably the best way. So example one, the new employee package. As I said, we're not going to be just talking about software development. Will touch on different areas like the marketing, talent management, IT, of course. But here's one example. A company has an attrition problem. Well, happens, right? They try to solve the problem. The HR team is tasked to do something about it, and they decide to enhance the current employee package. They develop a new employee package, and that is to include better healthcare benefits, other perks like gym membership and whatnot. They deliver that package to the employees, and after that, the attrition goes further up. Now, further up, that's interesting. Why? Well, it turns out that this is not solving the real problem. It turns out that the real problem, what they didn't know, some of them did not know, and others knew but didn't dare to even tell to their management, is that people just don't see themselves as a part of that company because they don't believe they can build their careers with that company. And now, as the HR team delivered an improvement, quote unquote, which completely ignores that career development component and fully is dedicated to the benefits package, proves to them that this company doesn't mean business. And those of them who are more capable are seeking a better future outside, right? So much time spent. They worked on that employee package for a quarter, and yet nothing has been delivered. It's all wasted, right? Quite a waste of effort, and also quite a waste of talented employees. Example 2, company-wide quality program. So here it is, this big, powerful company that develops and delivers solutions that rely on hardware, firmware, and software development. A large company with offices around the world, and they launched this quality program to recast the quality practices in every location, in all possible dimensions, like software quality assurance, hardware architecture of things, etc., etc. Lots of concerns. Various program champions are assigned to this. And 2.5 years later, after all of the effort and money spent, turns out the teams are not doing anything differently in terms of quality. And actually what happens, even more interestingly, the top leadership actually does believe that the quality program helped. And they do believe so because the middle management tells them that it was great, but they can't even mention the quality program to their teams anymore to retain at least some remaining credibility. So another example where a lot has been done and exactly nothing has been achieved. Last example, productivity improvement software. This IT team, as a part of a large maker of auto parts, is tasked to seek opportunities to improve productivity of people on and off the production floor. So this IT team is basically smart. They are actually thinking about the results of their work, and they are trying to even prioritize their projects based on that, based on, for instance, how much man hours they give back to the people that they are serving, that the software that they develop will be serving, and maybe it will save those plant engineers, a team of plant engineers, 10,000 man hours over the course of the year. So they take on that project, they deliver the software. The problem is, what they do not know is that a lot of that software gets dumped by the customer because it actually does not work out as they think it does. But because they're not checking, they have no idea that they're basically not achieving anything with it. So these three examples show basically the same pattern. Something is done, and something can be done in a most exquisite form, outputs delivered, but outcomes not achieved. And there's this disconnect, probably one of the worst disconnects you could imagine, which is we build something and that something does not enable the outcomes that we want. And we often just, in our language, in our demeanor, in our thinking, are so much focused on the outputs, which is software that we build, hardware that we may be engineering, marketing campaigns that we may devise, organizational policies, process guardrails, you name it, right? But what it all is supposed to enable is actually the outcomes, which is complex human behavior. And unfortunately, that's not what is our primary focus. So no wonder we have disconnects like that. And then when we ask ourselves, oh, where did the money go? Well, it fell through the cracks in the disconnects in the organization, because almost every time we have a complicated structure with multiple teams and multiple levels in the organization, until the ultimate outcome, a lot of money gets wasted. It basically falls through those disconnects. It's a pretty sad picture. So when as a team we pride ourselves in delivering the next increment of something, we should ask ourselves, what does that increment really do? Does it just, all that it does, it looks good, makes us feel good, or it enables some desired human behavior, which is not a trivial thing at all. Now, this is the other interesting point. We cannot assume that the outcome, which is human behavior, will be easily described or describable with a number. But that is such a frequent temptation that we have. It's rather well described with a narrative, a story. And I don't necessarily mean a user story, a term that we're so used to, but that too. It's a narrative, right? But you would think of a behavior of the person affected by your outputs as a story that you have to embrace as a producer of that asset, of that output, in hopes to enable that behavior, right? So this is another big mistake that we are making. We aim at a number, or we just assume that as soon as that output is delivered, everything else was just going to happen on its own. Now, here's another interesting aspect of outcomes. What if my outcomes are wrong? I think that I want this particular human behavior. Let's say, back to our previous example, we're looking to enable these new quality practices on teams. How do we know that those will be the right quality practices, right? And why do we need quality practices? We need them so as to blah blah blah. So this is the key question. So as to, this is something we should be asking ourselves over and over again. And what we built as a result of asking this question repetitively, starting from the outputs that we deliver. Let's say in this example, we are building a CSR repository software that will allow customer service representatives to better to be able to easier and faster find answers to customer problems, right? It's a reasonable, noble intent. Now, we ask, why do we do this? Well, so as to the CSR could find answers faster. But now is the next question, and why is that? Well, so as to the customer would get their issue resolved faster, and that is to get higher customer satisfaction. This construct that you see is what we call an outcome chain. This is important. This is basically a way to holistically think about your task, not just the task at hand, but the impact it makes, the ripple effect of that impact on the rest of the organizational goals. Very important. Now, it's also important to note that every time you have a connection anywhere on the chain, there can be a disconnect, and trying to spot those is very important. Maybe the disconnect is here, and someone finally figures out that, hey guys, hold on. So there are some issues that customers face that no matter how fast we respond to them and how good is the customer service provided, they will still be unhappy. And therefore we should think of yet another path here, which is maybe additional system, which would be the preventive system, allowing us to help avoid issues in the first place, and maybe communicate with other departments, with shipment, etc., blah blah blah, right? So so as to remediate this disconnect. But you see, immediately looking at this picture, we can have a reasonable conversation about this. And generally speaking, when you have an outcome chain, the structure is all the same. In any case, you start with an output, the rest of them are outcomes. The first one is what we call the immediate outcome, the rest are higher order outcomes, and the final one is the ultimate outcome. Knowing ultimate outcomes is very important, but also focusing on an immediate outcome is what you usually do, and that's okay. The rest of them are used to validate the assumptions about the immediate outcome. Now, it is important to remember that this is, in some sense, the ultimate tool for systems thinking in the enterprise context. We used to think before that all we need to do is think value streams. By the way, value stream is a very helpful tool for sure. But enterprise has multiple different value streams. Often, as Karen Martin points out in her book, is multiple value streams feed into each other. That's absolutely natural and reasonable. So in terms of the connection between outcome chains and value streams, it's approximately like this. You can think about it this way, where you have different value streams. The output of one value streams is the input to another, or it's rather even one is enabling the other, right? So for instance, your development team will produce the CSR repository, and that's their development value stream. The CSR will have their own operational value stream to serve the customer, and so on and so forth, all the way to the ultimate outcome, right? And that's why if we, for instance, have a disconnect somewhere in the outcome chain, which means that this outcome here is not properly enabled by the outputs on this end, it doesn't matter how well we optimize the value stream at this point, because the other ones will still suffer from that disconnect and we will not achieve the outcome. So this is the good language to have a conversation with an executive of the company, right? But this is also an important language to talk to, let's say, a developer on the team, a product owner also, the product manager, in terms of, hey, what we are creating, will it actually enable those other subsequent value streams in the organization, and therefore those outcomes for them. Okay, as a little homework, think about what outcomes your group is after, and maybe just thinking explicitly about those outcomes is a good thing to do. Also, try to map out, just as an experiment, try to map out an outcome chain. And if you cannot do it completely to the ultimate outcome, that's okay. That's not the end of the world. Just try to do that as deep up as you can. Business value, that's another important conversation. Many companies are puzzled with questions like, what is the business value of a business partnership, a new marketing professional who joins us, a new product or service that we're developing, a new software feature, a business intelligence report, a process improvement. We will be referring to all of these things as assets. Why are these questions so important to organizations? Well, for multiple reasons. For starters, they want to know the ROI, the return on their investments. On the other hand, they also would like to make smarter decisions in terms of prioritization. Let's say you have capacity for only one feature or one initiative, and you have two candidates for that. Which one do you choose, right? That's a very typical question. And also the third typical aspect of that would be, for instance, some initiative or some project where you're already doing something. Can we improve the value yield on that particular initiative? That's also a very valid concern. So a lot of important questions. Of course, enterprises want to know the answers. And of course, unfortunately, they are very bad at providing decent answers to these questions. And there are multiple reasons to that. I will introduce some methods here. Of course, only the most simple. The rest of it is in the book. But the fundamental approach to this is by understanding value paths. So what's a value path? By example, as usual, imagine there's this guy, his name is Doug, and he's a CEO of a company that manufactures some physical products. And he seeks to sign a partnership with a company that can serve as a good sales channel for his products So, and the outcome of this partnership would be a revenue increase, of course, due to that additional channel of distribution. And Doug's Doug's idea of what they could make with them due to this partnership is the projection of around 30 million over the course of 5 years. So that's his assessment. Again, it's hypothetical, but that's as good as we can get up front, right? Now, we will call this link a value path simply because we have now some understanding of what business value it creates. And look how beautiful this is. Value is expressed in money. This is beautiful. We can reason about that very easily now. Here's another example, still with Doug. Here's company B, and company B can still do the same thing as company A. Revenue increase due to the distribution channel. And but he assesses it as something 26 million, worth 26 million over the course of 5 years. However, there's another value path in this case, and that's because of cost saving. And the cost saving is due to the fact that they also produce parts for that fit his product, and he is considering them as a sourcing partner as well. And the assessment on his side is that he could earn around 9 million in cost savings over the course of 5 years. So very simple idea. We add those two together to get the total value of 35 million. Now the choice is relatively simple. If he goes only with one partnership, it will be partnership B because it produces total value of 35 million. Beautiful, again, because everything can be expressed in real US dollars. Now, the problem is that it's by far not always so, especially for those complex tasks that we are involved in, like IT, like talent management, like marketing, that often sits so far deep on the outcome chain, far away from the ultimate outcome. Like in our example with CSR repository, trying to say what would be the business value of some features in CSR repository, having this long an outcome chain, that's a crime. It's just an exercise in creative writing. That's all it is, right? So some different approach is obviously needed. So let's say we have two features that we're considering: fuzzy search and advanced error reporting. And we're trying to assess their business value. Let's also, for the sake of simplicity, assume that they have approximately the same size. They will require about the same effort from the teams. So the only difference is which one has higher business value, and we will go with that one. So here's what we're going to do. Instead of having this whole outcome chain, we will basically focus on the immediate outcome only. So just this, right? And the next step, we'll try to double click on that connection and see if that connection could be unpacked, if it has some structure, right? And indeed, we could think about it, for instance, in how exactly fuzzy search and advanced error reporting will enhance the outcome of CSR being able to find answers faster for the problems that customers are having. And we may consider this through the following three dimensions: the inclusion of results. So maybe some results would not be found otherwise, but maybe with fuzzy search and advanced error reporting, they could be found more easily. Relevance of those results, quality of those results item. I'm not going to go into too much detail on what these are. It's all contextual. But now what we try to do is we ask ourselves, okay, so we have these three value paths. We cannot express this in money, but could we at least relatively assess the value of each value path? And we will start by first determining the importance of each of the three value paths to this outcome. So let's say the team decides that it's 3, 5, and 2. And don't ask me why, they decided so, okay? But it's just shows the relative value, the relative importance of those three value paths to accomplishing the outcome. And then basically what we'll do is we will substitute these into the outputs and try to see on this side how well each of these features satisfies the demand of this, of the importance. So fuzzy search. Let's say it's 5, 1, and 0. Got it. So all we have to do now is basically multiply this number by this, right, to get the value score for this whole value path. Do the same for this one and for this one, and then just add them up. Very simple. And we do that. And we get 20. Again, relative numbers. Okay. Second one, advanced error reporting, different scores. We do the same thing. 25. We got our answer. Very simple. Now, again, there's additional complications to this for sure. Reality often has surprises. But if you noticed, what we were not doing, we did not attempt answering the question of what's the value of the output directly. It's nonsensical. Don't do that. In order to understand what's the value of a feature, of a marketing campaign, or whatever, you can only understand that through understanding the outcome of that, and then basically unpacking that outcome into multiple value paths, scoring them, and then aggregating the results to understand the total value. Now, the book goes much, much deeper. By the way, business value is the biggest chapter in the book. So there you will find some situations where, as we call it, value path can be moderated by some external factors, and that happens very often, and especially for large initiatives, there's so many factors that influence them. So for instance, in that talent management case, psychological safety can be a value moderator. For CSR repository, UX can be a big moderator, or you name it, it can be multiple ones, right? Additionally, some paths have subpaths, and those subpaths may have subpaths. We call it fractal value paths. Happens often in complex domain and also has to be treated properly. So you will find a so-called Pareto unpacking method for value discovery, a useful tool to do this. And especially, for instance, if your company is trying to assess the value of a complex asset, and that's what we call, by the way, complex asset, the asset that has fractal value paths. Maybe they're trying to choose a new product or platform from a vendor. That's a heck of a task, right? A lot of tiny paths, and how to assess value in this case is a really sophisticated question. But less with that. The little homework that I'm suggesting is try to think of where you see the lack of understanding of business value in your organization, and what proper analysis could be done to facilitate that understanding a little bit. Okay, not so much time left. I'll try to gloss over a couple more concepts here, and we will be basically done. So maybe the last conversation that I want to have is probing, that also deserves quite a place in the book. Dealing with complex tasks, it is really, really important to remember that we don't know all the answers to all the questions. Moreover, we often don't even know the right questions to ask. Two examples, Bob and Ashley. Bob is a plumber. He's operating on the market for a long time. He has his customer called today. He goes into the house. They think it's a clogged kitchen sink. He starts his task. He goes to the basement, looks at the structure of the pipes. He opens the water in all parts of the house, looks at them, sees that it's actually seems to be clogged everywhere. 5 minutes later, he comes in with a snake drill, applies it, and yet 5 more minutes later, the water is draining perfectly well in the whole building, right? So very simple example. Ashley has a much more complicated example. She is an HR director in a large company of 2,000 people. And what happened in the company is that basically they developed a skill debt. The tasks has become more and more complicated, but the skills did not actually keep up with that. And now she is tasked by her leadership to actually cover that gap. And what she's trying to do is similar thing as Bob did. She's trying to figure out where the problem is, and her and her team go over and interview different people to understand where the gaps are in skills. They organize trainings, they do it. As a result, no skill improvement and attrition goes up. Wow, interesting. In Bob's case, great outcome. In Ashley's case, bad outcome. The reason is we're dealing with a relatively simple situation, dealing with an inherently complex task. In this case, inherently complex tasks contain not only known unknowns, but also importantly unknown unknowns. And while Bob knew what variables he needed to figure out values for, Ashley actually made a mistake. She did not know what are even the variables that she has to look at. And it turned out that her outcome actually was so because people did not want to develop career in this company for multiple other reasons. Leadership was not supportive. Career did not look very attractive. And those few who benefited from the skill trainings basically immediately left the company in search of a better future, right? So, and what's interesting is, by the way, we can ask, could Ashley have done better? Could she just have known her variables up front? The answer is no. Complex tasks depend on a gazillion of highly interconnected parameters that are just hard to predict how they operate together. And basically you can have Ashley's company A with this outcome. Same action would cause two other different outcomes in yet two other different companies. So the answer is no. But what's needed is probing is needed. And that's the action, not a speculation, not analysis. That's the action that stirs up the system and basically reveals the interconnection between those parts of the system. So in terms of the tools of what to do and how to do in our environment, whether you are developing a new feature, whether you are creating a new IT asset, or doesn't matter what you do, as long as you are operating in a complex domain, probing is necessary. And some structural ways of doing this, I'm not going to go into too much depth on this, but some of those are available. You can read more about them, but one of them is based, for instance, on the direct probing. You just need to know all the components of your system. This is one other mistake that we make often in Agile, by the way. We over rely on things like demo. While demo is basically a sandbox environment, right? And we don't have things like the real need, the real workflows, and maybe the real customers even, right? So all those components are missing. That causes a problem. We introduced two methods, direct and indirect probing, and there are some constructive ways of creating the probing scenarios for direct and indirect ones. Unfortunately, cannot go into too much depth on this. Lastly, guys, I just want to make one more note. The important role that is missing in the enterprise is often this: the outcome owner, right? We have so many roles that nurture outputs, but so little, maybe except for the people who have the ultimate profit and loss responsibility, but they are so high up on the outcome chain that they don't know what's going on with your immediate outcomes, right? So ask yourself, who is the outcome owner in your environment? And maybe it's you. Maybe you need to ramp up your game to be able to step up to this role. And focus yourself, your group, and show leadership in your organization by delivering outcomes and enabling outcomes, not just producing the outputs that may or may not have value to the organization. Or maybe it's not you, maybe it's a person that needs your help and enablement in this case. So maybe you will serve as a guide to them in creating this awareness and the right vector for the enterprise. Okay, guys, this would be it. Sorry, I took 3 minutes over the time and we didn't make all of it with the scope. Let's open for questions.
All right. Thanks, Alex. We have a few. First question was, is there a Visio template or some other kind of template to help instantiate the diagrams?
Oh, no, interesting. So there can be, and I absolutely encourage you to do that. But there's no template. That's basically what we have been using. So we just never really intended it necessarily in that context. But funny enough, you probably noticed that oh my goodness, this is the problem with slide builds, that the book design is all white. It's not accidental, because usually you do this on the whiteboard. So and the reason why is because every time you operate with interaction maps, you want to spawn a conversation. That's the primary thing, right? So you want this highly visual, and it doesn't matter if it's physical whiteboard or virtual whiteboard. Luckily these days we have plenty of opportunity to do so. And Visio, by the way, if that's your tool of choice, then absolutely do so. I'm not aware of that. It's basically interaction maps is the tool that we have introduced and are using. So we're not aware of any such things created. Maybe you would create one. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The next question is, what's a real world example of a fractal path?
Okay, very good question. All right, so imagine that you, as a company, are trying to select a product from multiple different vendors. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's corporate document management or search system or something like that, right? So when you look at that product, you look at multiple user scenarios, right? Each scenario can be thought of as a value path. But guess what happens with complex products? Scenarios split into sub scenarios. So your document management system may involve, for instance, signing. Signing may involve signing with multiple parties. Signing with multiple parties may involve signing under different conditions, which is conditional, different transition logic in the signing, et cetera, et cetera. And often you can keep adding and adding detail. And why we care about subpaths is because sometimes a subpath changes the whole game, and that subpath can be 2, 3, 5 levels down, right? Another example, you are hiring a highly skilled professional, let's say a marketing professional, or some kind of campaign design professional, right, or software engineer. The expertise has fractal value paths. So for instance, it's a Java developer. So how do they create value? Well, maybe what they do is they implement message queuing, they implement complex data structures. Oh, data structures will split into iterable collections, non-iterable collections. You got the idea, right? And you're basically drilling it down further and further. And by the way, value paths depend also, they are dynamic. They depend on the time. For this Java developer, depending on what's in his or her backlog, will determine which value paths will activate. And sometimes it's those very low level, tiny little bits that are complete game changers. So that's why fractal value paths and the assets that have them are called complex assets. Introduce so much uncertainty because it may come from very deep down in the stack. I hope those two examples help. You'll get more examples in the book for sure. It actually shows exactly how to calculate value using Pareto unpacking in that case.
Awesome. Okay, the next question is, what's the title of the person who does this, and organizationally, where do they fit?
Okay, so I guess maybe the last question would be suggestive of the answer, outcome owner. Very good question. Where do they fit? Let me just go to the slide that contains the answer. They fit anywhere you have outcomes on the outcome chain. So there will be an outcome owner somewhere at the level of your immediate outcome. Could that be your PO, by the way? Oh yeah, absolutely, as long as they are empowered to fix on the outcomes. But often, unfortunately, POs are incredibly underpowered, and they are also very, very attached to the product. Now, as an outcome owner, you cannot be attached to outputs. As a matter of fact, you have to seek better ways to enable favorable outcomes, even at the cost of switching to other alternative outputs, right? Products, features, etc. Right? But there will be outcome owners at the levels higher up. Maybe this is the operational level of the customer you enable. There's an outcome owner there. There's an outcome owner there. Sometimes an outcome owner can span more than one level of outcomes, but you cannot go too far with that because that's a freaking tough job, guys. It's a freaking tough job. And again, look, we pay so much attention to this. All of what we do, even in Agile, by the way, this is so sad. Even in Agile, we pay so much attention to this. Story points, SMORI points, burn down charts. Guys, it all pertains to outputs, not to outcomes. And so little attention falls here. So there's actually a lot of underattended tasks to outcome ownership. So it really is great that I'm hearing these questions from you. That's really encouraging. Thank you.
All right, and the last question posted is just more, can we get a copy of the presentation?
Yes, in PDF format, absolutely.
Yeah,
I will do that soon after this presentation.
Yeah, just get it to me and I'll post it. I'll put it in the link to it inside of the comments. So
yep.
Go back into the comments, and then anyone who is registered would also get notified when I post that. So yeah, if you get it to me, I can do that. Since then someone did post, so this left to right isn't the management chain. Isn't time?
Oh, very good question. Right. No, it isn't. The management chain is rather orthogonal. It will have its own levels in the organization. This is, for instance, I'm hiring people, right? Those people will be then on teams developing software. That software will go to accountants, who will then prepare business intelligence reports to someone else in the organization, maybe to manufacturing group, et cetera, et cetera. So you may think of this as more horizontal, right, than the management vertical. But that's a very good question. Yeah, we should actually be very clear about the distinction.
Okay. Anyone have any other questions? That's all that's in the chat. Oh, someone just posted, where do OKRs fit?
Oh, good question. OKRs can be used as a method to approximate outcomes. However, I have to caution you, OKRs can be used to the benefit or to the demise of your group, because oftentimes they are intended in a highly tangible and unfortunately dangerous way, keeping them way too close to outputs and way too far from outcomes. Now, another thing that I unfortunately did not have a chance to expand on, but it is very thoroughly described in the book, is the emergent nature of outcomes in complex environments. And that is very important because outcomes, which is human behavior, they cannot be designed to a specification, they emerge. So, and that's another thing to be very careful with OKRs, because sometimes you may overconstrain a far more beneficial paths that you don't know yet. Remember those unknown unknowns. Not all unknown unknowns are bad. Some of them are actually very good and beneficial to the organization. So yes, there is value to OKRs, but use them incredibly cautiously.
All right. One other, no. So how can we see when this value happens that you were talking about earlier?
Okay, so that certainly depends on the situation. In some instances, the connection between outputs and outcomes is not that distant in time. For instance, if you launched a marketing campaign that is as simple as just getting some customer conversions, you may get customer conversions within a matter of a week or two, and you see already the vector where the system is moving with that. So that's one example. But there can be a far more sophisticated examples, especially if what you create is deep down on the outcome chain. It may take months until you see the outcome. That's where indirect probing is very useful. Unfortunately, we could not talk about that today. The book expands on that. Indirect ones can basically collapse the timeline in a smart way, but yeah, they require some creativity. I'm outlining the so-called substitution method. to design some indirect probing scenarios. So maybe that will help. And also there's a whole section in chapter 4 dedicated to probing in a complex outcome chain. So that's where I would encourage you to look.
All right, someone did ask, how much is the book and how can I get a copy? I just posted a link to it to Amazon. I don't know if you have a preferred vendor.
It's only on Amazon, and yeah, we have paperback now available at the cost of $29, and hopefully the electronic version will be available the upcoming week.
And I guess the last question we'll hit is, back on OKRs, can you give an example of an OKR that would be beneficial to the outcome?
Well, so look, if I'm okay, so maybe in this case I can go as primitive as a slide suggests. Let's go to this one. And from this perspective of CSR repository, an O could easily be, I find answers faster. That's an O. The KR can be the specific breakdown of what this means. And that was the exact nature of my caution, is that if I try, as OKRs usually suggest, to get numerical indicators to this, that's where the rubber hits the road, and that's where the danger comes, right? I can say how fast maybe they can find it, how relevant those could be, other things. You can also, by the way, connect the KRs in OKRs to the value paths. I'm sorry, it's not so fast, like here, right? So something can be derived from this, but again, the same caution, guys, as before, that these may not always be absolute values, and they are some kind of proxies. So just to be cautious about that. But yeah, maybe inclusion could be expressed in some absolute values that would proxy that. It's totally possible. Relevance, for instance, you can say that on average, let's say 40% of the results on the top page the CSR is finding are empirically proven to be relevant to their query. How about that, right? But again, like I said, you have to be open to alternatives, and OKRs don't always allow you for that flexibility. So I hope that helps.
Okay, I think we're at time. So thanks, Alex, for the return trip. Interesting.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure talking to
you
guys. Thank you for the questions, and I hope to see you soon on various different venues. And good luck with enabling your organizations in achieving those outcomes. Those are not simple tasks. Good luck with that.
All right. Thanks, everyone.